So my tripod is broken. I changed my hairstyle for this one, and also there's a glare in my glasses. So, you know, normal issues that are, these are normal issues, right? Okay. Hi everyone, it's me, Jess. Welcome back to my channel. You get 2 videos this week on the BookTube Prize. Aren't you lucky, you folks? I'm here to talk about how I ranked the 6 books that I read for the final round of the BookTube Prize 2025. So the winner of the BookTube Prize in 2025 was James by Percival Everett. I had already read James, and I'm not going to shock anyone by saying that I ranked it first. I have it here. I'm not going to shock anyone by saying that I ranked James first. Just starting out strong here. For me, and you'll know this if you saw my original review of James, for me, there was no book that could really compare. Even though I adored several of the books out of this grouping, and several of them I thought were really fantastic books, really excellent books, would have loved to have seen them win. I could not bring myself to rank James any lower than first in the round. So I will talk about it at the end of this video. People who maybe have already seen me talk about James or seen a lot of other people talk about James, you don't have to watch to the end of the video. I'll talk about it last since I ranked it first. And so I'm going to go from the lowest ranked to the highest ranked out of the books that I read. I don't have several of them with me because I've returned them to the library. So just quickly, the books that were in the finalist grouping were James by Percival Everett, My Friends by Hisham Matar, Martyr by Kaveh Akbar, Clear by Carys Davies, Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange, and There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak. So starting out with 6th place, I ranked Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange in 6th place. I had read this already for the quarterfinal round, so I had read it very, very recently, and it was one of my least favorite in that round as well. Unfortunately, I don't have like a summary of that round, and I haven't reviewed the book on my channel either yet, so I will just talk a little bit about it and how I felt about it. If you haven't read Wandering Stars, it is a multi-generational novel that serves as a prequel or a sequel to Tommy Orange's other book, There, which I have on my shelf and haven't read. I'm not sure if it's 3 Theres or 2 Theres. I have it on my shelf. I haven't read it yet, although this book, we are to understand that it can be read as a standalone and that we could judge it as a standalone. So it opens with the 1864 Sand Creek Massacre, and really follows this legacy of trauma through the family line up to contemporary 2018 in Oakland. I think it's only there, not 3 Theres. So it's linked to the book There, or it's connected to the book There. It's actually functioning as a prequel and a sequel to There. And many of the same characters are explored in each novel in the same bloodlines. Orange is really tackling a very deep and very heavy history, looking at cultural erasure, assimilation through institutions, in particular the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, looking at addiction, but also at resilience and survival, particularly intergenerational resilience and dealing with intergenerational trauma. It's very heavy, this book. It really is sweeping. It looks at many decades of displacement, and the story itself moves between past and present in a way that seems to really emphasize, or it emphasized for me, the way that what seems like it took place in the past is ever present. So the way that history not so much repeats itself, but more that history just continues to live on in the experiences and in the inner world and the minds of these characters. And I think that this is one of the strengths of the book, is how Tommy Orange is really able to give voice to the characters across time from one character, an early ancestor who survives this massacre, and then to the later generations who are grappling with their native identities in this urban environment in Oakland. And these contemporary characters are more rooted in the present, like, you know, they have this urban lifestyle, but they're tied to the past. But ultimately, it seemed to me like Wandering Stars was divided really into two parts. The first, this aftermath of the Sand Creek Massacre in the 1800s, and then there were like a few instances of subsequent incarceration, the assimilation in the boarding school experience, many different characters that described those experiences in chronological chapters. And then, so that's the first part of the book. And then in the second part of the book, it picks up, I think, see, I haven't read there, but I think it picks up in time after they're there. And it takes on the multiple points of view of the characters from that book, from the first book, and then deals with the aftermath of a very violent incident that brought them all together. It's a bit disorienting to read it as a standalone. But what we're meant to take from it is that these characters, particularly in the second half, are not only descendants of the characters and they're there, but they're also inheritors of repression and their lost identity, substance abuse, as I said, poverty, trauma, and so on. This is the way that the history repeats itself, even in the kind of smallest of ways. But what I found really difficult about Wandering Stars, I did struggle with the way that the book was constructed. I struggled with the lack of plot. I struggled with the storytelling. I think that some of the writing was quite good. I thought some of the writing was very insightful, but I felt like the way that it was presented here was really at the expense of the actual story. And it could be that it would be better if I had read there, but like I said, we were supposed to be able to read Wandering Stars as a standalone and be able to evaluate it as a standalone. I think the issue with Wandering Stars is that it has a very interesting premise, it has a very interesting story, and it looks in an interesting way at this history, but it struggles to pull you into the narrative and pull you into the story. I think just because it's coming from so many different points of view and so many different points in history, I just could never really get into the book. I kept pulling back and it just kind of, I don't know how to explain it, it just felt a bit fragmented and it felt like it didn't have the cohesion that I wanted it to have. And I've read other books by Indigenous authors that I understand it's an aspect of the storytelling, but that I've gotten along much more with. I'll just give the examples of And Then She Fell and The Only Good Indians. Like both of those were similar in the sense that there were different characters with different stories, but it flowed much better and I was much more able to connect to their stories. And even with elements of Indigenous storytelling like magical realism, for example, in And Then She Fell, I really still was able to completely get into that novel. Those are the reasons why I didn't get along so well with Wandering Stars and why I ended up placing it 6th in my ranking. From there, the book that was 5th in my ranking, and I think some people will disagree with me and that's fine, was Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. I had read Martyr in a group read actually that I hosted on my channel back in the fall, and even though I had read it in the fall, I revisited it, but I really remembered it. I remember the experience of reading it, and I remember the things that I didn't like about it. So I was really able to remember that reading experience, and there were definitely mixed feelings within the group. I had a lot of issues with Martyr. I talked about them at that time. I'll leave my review linked in the description box below, but just to summarize, for the benefit of my explanation of my rankings, Martyr is a debut novel. That's Akbar's first novel, which may have a lot to do with why I ranked it 5th and why I felt it wasn't as good as the other novels in this grouping. It tells the story of a man named Cyrus Shams. He is a queer Iranian-American poet, and he is in recovery from addiction, and he is haunted by the death of his mother, who was apparently killed in a plane crash, which was caused by a mistakenly shot US missile that brought down the civilian plane. That I later found out was drawn from the real Iran Air Flight 655 disaster. It really focuses on Cyril and how he handles his addiction, how he deals with his grief, and he becomes obsessed with the idea of martyrdom, that your death should mean something. Through his exploration of this idea of martyrdom, he comes across this woman, an artist, who is putting on an exhibition, and then he goes to New York to meet this artist, and they have a connection that gets revealed that I thought was kind of contrived. There were things that I didn't like about the way the story was told that I thought were too convenient. And I talk about those a lot in my review. I found the structure of Martyr to be quite loose. It really is all over the place. So it's because of this looseness that I felt like it was lacking structure. And I think that that is a big problem with the novel. And I think it's objectively a problem with the novel. I understand that each of the sections are interesting, or that they have parts of them that are interesting, but I also felt that they didn't, some of the sections, some of the parts of the story didn't really add anything to the overall narrative or to the themes that Akbar was exploring in the telling of this story, particularly the theme of martyrdom and grief and his processing of his mom's death and his experience living in America and his father's experience living in America. So again, it was really missing the parts that make a novel feel like it's a story, like it's a complete and comprehensive story. There were chapters that were written from various different points of view. Chapters from Cyrus's point of view, from his father's point of view, from his mother's point of view, and I didn't feel like those different points of views worked very well when they were put together. There were also sequences of dreams, sequences of myths. I think it detracted actually from the storytelling to choose that structure within which to tell the story. I thought certain ideas that the novel attempted to explore were very interesting thematically, because Martyr is interested in the question of how to give one's life meaning, particularly through death. But it sort of, for me, focused on the meaning of life. And I'm not sure, like, I like that as a theme, but I'm not sure how effective it was in helping us to explore it. Or it wasn't quite deep enough for me, if that makes sense. I don't know. It felt a bit superficial to me in terms of what the answer to that question is. So I think I really appreciated what he was attempting to do. I think he was very ambitious with this novel. I think it's a great start. It has kind of the hallmarks of a debut novel. It's like it's trying, but it's not quite succeeding in doing what it wants to do. And it also felt like it was trying very, very hard, which I think is another drawback of this novel. And so unfortunately, those attempts that it was making kind of missed the mark for me. Another book that I preferred, that I think does this so much better, is a book like The Idiot by Elif. So yeah, unfortunately for me, Martyr was one of those books that I read in the grouping that I felt had a lot of potential, but it just didn't really come together in a way that worked. And I feel like it's okay. I feel like good with my ranking. Like I know people really love this novel. It got a lot of hype, but I think compared to the other 4 books that I'm going to talk about, it belongs in the 5th spot. The reason that I put it above Wandering Stars is that it did still have a good story, and there were some points of view and some experiences expressed in this book that I thought were very powerful, in many ways more powerful or more impactful than what I had read in Wandering Stars. Not to say that the content itself is what I would be comparing, like an Iranian immigrant experience versus the experience of an indigenous person, that trauma that they would have experienced. They're both exploring trauma and grief. But there was something about Kaveh Akbar's book that was a little bit more interesting. It sustained me more. I was able to stick with it more and enjoy it more. It was more cohesive, despite being not as cohesive as it could have been. So now we're going to get to the 4 books that I really struggled to rank, because they're 4 books that I really, really, really appreciated, really enjoyed. I think they're great books. The one that I put in 4th was, and this was tough because I really like this book, was Clear by Carys Davies. I really love this little book. I just didn't love it as much as the other two books that I read in this category. And it's a shorter book. It's a powerful book. It's a shorter book. I think that probably played something into my rankings. I reviewed this book and read this book also earlier this year. I will leave that review again linked. I hope you guys check out these links because I talk a lot about these books. If you haven't checked out those videos, do check them out. I'll leave it linked, as I said, in the description box below. The story of Clear is set in 1843 in a historical period where you have what were called the Highland clearances by the church. Davies follows the story of a reverend. His name is John Ferguson, and he is sent. He doesn't have any money. He's kind of uneasy with what's happening in the church, but he is sent to, because he needs the money, he's sent to, because he agrees to this because he needs the money, but he is sent to a remote island off the far coast of the North Sea. He has to evict the island's sole inhabitant, a man named Akbar, and the two men won't be able to communicate because Akbar doesn't speak the same language. They don't speak the same language. It's that gets explored in this novel. It's great. It's a great book. What happens is that when John arrives at the island, he unexpectedly has an accident, and Akbar takes him in and takes care of him and really nurses him back to the point where he can go home. It's a really beautiful book in that it's quiet, but there's this emotional center to it where John is facing this moral crisis. Akbar is this man who's been able to live on his own in isolation, which is a really interesting character. You also get a really good sense of the landscape. Yeah, there's this interplay between like sense of duty, but also empathy, and the friendship that emerges between John and Akbar through this nurturing character who doesn't know this man and is taking care of him and takes him in. But it's a very short novel. It's very tightly structured. It's really, really well written, but because it's so short and it's a bit compressed, I kind of wanted more. The transformation of the character happens fairly quickly, and there's something about that that I'm not sure is completely believable. It could have been even better if we'd gotten a bit more of John's experience and transformation. Like, he has to really come to terms with this moral dilemma, and there's a part that the wife plays, that his wife comes to get him, and there's something there that I think could have been deepened that I would have appreciated. But I loved it. I really, really loved it. So it was really hard for me to figure out how I was going to talk about ranking it below the three other books that ended up being the top three. It was really hard. So the book that I ranked in third place is There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak. This is the first book by Elif Shafak that I have ever read. I really, really, really liked this book. I thought also that this book would have more of a wider appeal. It's a book that I think there are more people who might find their way into this book in terms of the story. It's quite a big, full, complete story of these three central characters, one of whom I think is very, very appealing to most readers. His name is Arthur. He was very appealing to me. And these characters, their stories are separated by time and geography. And so we learn their stories, and we go back and forth between the different characters' stories over the course of the book. And I think it's actually quite effectively done. And the characters and the time that they're living in are quite different from one another. And so for that reason, it's extremely engaging. We have Arthur, a poor young boy who's born in London, and Arthur has this like extremely brilliant memory, and it's his ability to remember that kind of gets him out of his situation, which is one of, living in the slums. He's very poor. His parents were alcoholics, and he's basically living in the streets. We first start out with the Epic of Gilgamesh, and the Epic of Gilgamesh is followed throughout. It's Arthur's story that sort of is the one that drives the plot and the narrative. We then also meet a young girl. She's 10 years old. Her name is Narin in 2014. She's a Yazidi girl, and she has this very rare disorder, and she knows that she will eventually go deaf. But before that happens, her grandmother, it's really the dynamic between her and her grandmother. She wants to baptize her at the sacred Iraqi temple, but things go badly in that story. We also have a story of an adult woman named Zalika, who is a scientist who studies water, or who becomes very fascinated by water. And water plays a really important role in this story. And so she is recently divorced and goes to live on this houseboat in London in 2018. And so we go back and forth between these different characters' stories. And then we also have this idea that water is kind of a motif of the story. It's represented by the Thames for Arthur's story, by the Tigris for Narin's story, and then she's also, Zalika is studying water, and she's living on a waterboat, and so water is just really important as this part of the story. It's not a character in the story per se, but it's like a motif. It's like a motif that helps us to understand memory and identity and even trauma. She has this sort of sweeping canvas where she explores history and the myth, this epic of Gilgamesh. She writes about this kind of cultural trauma in multiple different time periods. And I just think that it has a lot of appeal. I really enjoyed it. I liked the rhythm of moving between the different times and the different stories, and learning about the Yazidi plight, the whole water theme, and this really well-researched backdrop. I think it was very well written and very well structured. There are some really interesting themes also that she explores. So in particular, as I said, memory and water, this idea that the rivers carry memory and that water moves through these different time periods, that it can wash things away, but it also carries memory with it, is really central to the book. And I thought that that was really unique and interesting. And I understand that this is something that Elif Shafak has done before in her other books, which I haven't read, but I really appreciated it in this book. The characters are unique in that they have a sense of being outsiders. Arthur is clearly an outsider in Victorian London and has had to work his way into a situation where he can survive. And he's unique because of this unique ability to remember that makes him an outsider and an interesting character. And then you have Narin, who is within this tribe of Yazidi that's really an outsider tribe. And you have Zalika, who's also in her own displacement from her marriage, kind of an outsider, and exploring sort of what she's going to do next and how she's going to find her way outside of her marriage. So it also treads some quite dark territory that was unexpected. Like I didn't think it was going to become as heavy and as serious as it is in the middle of the book. I really appreciated Shafak's storytelling in this book, and I think if you like a story with a lot of layers and a lot of historical content, like it was obviously very well researched. Well, the three characters, the multiple time frames, and the connection that they have through the motif of water, I thought it was very well done, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. It has that saga feeling to it, that kind of epic feeling to it, and I became very attached to the character of Arthur. And so I think for those reasons, I put it in third in my ranking. We come down to the last two books. My second ranked book was My Friends by Hisham Matar. It would have been my first ranked book if James hadn't have been in the grouping. I cried so much reading this book. Oh my goodness, I really loved this book. I really, really did. It was so moving to me. It just, I don't know, it captured my heart in a very specific way. I think the writing is very, very good. The story is very, very good. The content is really fascinating. It's really about leaving your home behind and trying to make a new life for yourself and knowing that you can't go home. So our main character, Khaled, leaves Libya under Gaddafi, and he goes to study in Edinburgh. While he's there, he is persuaded by his friends to take part in, or his one friend to take part in, a demonstration against the regime in front of the Libyan embassy. He doesn't realize it when he goes to the demonstration, but the demonstrators are fired on, and Khaled is really badly wounded. He is then in hospital recovering, and he becomes very afraid that his identity has been exposed because of some television footage. And as a result of that, he doesn't know if the Gaddafi government knows who he is. And from that point on, he feels that he cannot go home because he doesn't want to endanger his family. And it's very heartbreaking because he is very close with his family, and now he's in a situation where he can't even talk to his family about the reasons why he doesn't want to come home. So it creates this distance between him and his family. It's really sad. Like, I cried so many times while reading this book. It's so affecting. And so Matar just does this incredible job of helping readers understand just what it's like for somebody to live in exile. So like returning home to his family is just not a possibility because of how risky it is and how dangerous it is. It is also about friendship. One of his friends, Mustafa, is a reader like he is. There's a real appreciation for literature explored in this book, particularly Arab literature. His other friend, Hisham, also a close friend to him. The friendship between Khaled and Mustafa, and eventually Hisham, whose short story affected Khaled especially greatly when he heard it as a teenager, and then they meet accidentally years later in Paris. So their lives take different paths. First, Mustafa goes back to Libya when the revolution there begins. And then Hisham also goes back to Libya while Khaled stays in London. And he's teaching English literature at a high school there. So the story of these friendships and Khaled's displacement and his exile are all told from the perspective of Khaled, and it's him reflecting about all of these experiences on a very, very long walk from the train station back to Shepherd's Bush, where he is now living, after having left Hisham at the train station after Hisham came to see him for a very short visit. It's just a very unique and very special novel. It's not like anything I've read before. It was very moving. It really touched me. I'll just read one passage that I marked just to give you a sense of how moving this book is. So I'm just going to read this one of the passages that I marked where he's trying to express what it's like when you have a shared experience with a friend that's unique to that friendship. That's what binds you, and that it's not something that you can even explain to anybody else. I will never have the words to explain what it is like to be shot, to lose the ability to return home, or to give up everything I expected my life to be, or why it felt as though I had died that day in St. James Square, and through some grotesque accident been reborn into the hapless shoes of an 18-year-old castaway, stranded in a foreign city where he knew no one and could be little use to himself. That all he could just about manage was to march through each day from beginning to end, and then do it again. I did not know how to say such things then. I still do not. And the inarticulacy filled my mouth. This, I now know, is what is meant by grief. A word that sounds like something stolen, picked out of your pocket when you least expect it. It takes a long time to learn the meaning of a word, particularly a word like that, or perhaps all words, even ones as simple as you or me. But that day, sitting opposite Mustafa, I felt I had no need for words, no need to translate or sum up or exchange an experience for a set of sentences. I loved him for it, and I loved him not only because he and I were united by a common fate, but because he appeared then to be a truer version of what a man is, proof that our loss was actually a gain. And everyone else, Hugh, Lucy, Henry, Saham, and even Rama, all those I worked with at the shop, the waiter who had just brought us our beers, the other customers in the cafe, and those walking outside up and down Holland Park Avenue, was somehow innocent, underdeveloped, yet to attain the full sense of what it is to be a human being in a world where people were willing to crush one another. And just like that, the poisonous notion that Mustafa and I somehow belonged to a superior minority coursed through me. We drank a toast to each other's good health. So I think, needless to say, this is a book that I discovered this year that I really loved. I wanted to read it last year. I'm so glad that being a judge for the BookTube Prize kind of forced me into reading it this year. It's definitely one of the best books that I've read this year. Hands down, for sure. And then finally, we have James by Percival Everett. I'm a huge fan of Percival Everett's. I've read and reviewed The Trees. I've read and reviewed James already on my channel. Despite the fact that I loved My Friends so much and I thought it was so good, I just don't think that anything really holds a candle to James. James is a very special book. I don't know that I could even compare it. It's a little bit like, you know, trying to compare James Baldwin to other books or other kind of really meaningful works of art in the form of literature. A lot of people have spoken about James. I don't know that I have anything that I can add to the conversation that I haven't already said in my previous review. Again, I will leave it linked in the description box below. But just quickly, James is the reimagining of the adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I guess you could say it's a reimagining. Really, it's James's story, or the story of Jim, who is the enslaved man who runs away with Huck, or who is Huck's companion from the original Huckleberry Finn. This story follows James's flight from slavery, his journey down the Mississippi, kind of with and without Huck, because there are times when they're not together, and a lot of those times where they're separated are explored in this novel. And really his quest to free his wife and his daughter. It's been widely praised. It won the 2024 National Book Award. It's won the 2025 Pulitzer Prize for Fiction. And really critics have said everything there really is to say about it. You know, I didn't read Huckleberry Finn. I actually feel like I should have been reading Voltaire when I read James, because Voltaire is a character that he interacts with in a dream or a hallucination in a very early part of the book. He has a conversation with Voltaire and other philosophers throughout the novel. This is such a sophisticated book, and we learn so much about life as an enslaved man. There's so much humor in this book. Percival Everett at his finest. I loved The Trees, but James feels even more controlled, more layered, more ambitious. His craft is truly mind-blowing. Oh yeah, no, the scene with Voltaire is when he is hallucinating because he was bitten by a venomous snake. And then he gets into this conversation with Voltaire and other Enlightenment philosophers about the racial logic embedded in Enlightenment thinking, and exposes the kind of moral hypocrisies of the men who wrote so passionately about equality at that time. And that's just one scene from this book. The scenes that stayed with me were particularly the ending, which I really loved, and also the scene where there's a moment where James receives a pencil, and you really feel the emotional weight of that object. He cherishes it. The idea of being able to read and write, it reminded me so much of Frederick Douglass's narrative, which I read. It's just a fantastic book. There are just dozens of examples of incredible scenes in this book. Every moment is jam-packed. So yeah, if you haven't read James yet, definitely make sure you read it. It's so good. It's so good I bought it in hardcover. Those are my rankings of the finalists in the judging for the BookTube Prize. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I've been articulate enough to explain my rankings, and I'd really love to hear from you in the comment section below. Did you read any of these books? What did you think of them? Did you judge for the BookTube Prize? If you did, how did you rank your books? All that stuff, all that good stuff. And I will see you in my next video. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye for now. My second ranked book was My Friends, very good. The first book that I'm going to talk about is the one that I ranked least. Actually, maybe I should just quickly explain. I'm just going to quickly... So, actually...